So thank you everybody for joining us this evening. I'm Liz Homan. I'm the chair of water, and Steve Sasso is joining me, and he is the second on the water committee. And as I've said before, we certainly don't do it alone. We have an amazing water committee made up of our mayor, Ari Bernstein, our director of operations, Ron Kistner, Alyssa Mayer, our water collector, and also our CFO, Mike Vreeland, our borough engineer, and Lane Simon, who I like to call our water historian. He works in the DPW and is also a water licensed resource. We do also use several consultants, particularly in the
I'm trying to
looking at
watch
the
a Zoom
opportunity to
meeting about the
sell
water
a
tower in
system.
Allendale, but I'm having a little
So
problem. Could you help me for a minute?
I'm going to try to just have everybody, I'm going to try to move on. So tonight, many times people say, why do you want to have these meetings? And the reality is that our group wants to be transparent and ensure that residents, and it's important to us that residents know we do want to hear your thoughts. So you'll see numerous times during the meeting, I put up my email so that you can email me questions. We can make an appointment to chat. We want to make sure that both we give information out transparently and also that we can understand and hear your concerns. Today, specifically, we would like to share information on SUEZ's offer to purchase the Allendale water system. We would like to do this tonight because we want to begin to ensure that residents are educated to make an informed decision, as this will be a question on the November election ballots. It will be a referendum question on the sale of the system. And then we want to make sure everybody knows how seriously we take our role with water as members of the water committee. So there's a lot of information tonight. If you have questions, again, there's my email. It's on the website. Please follow back up with me. Specifically, tonight's meeting, I'm going to give some background slides. There are 4 previous meetings that we have held virtually, and all of the recordings are on the borough website under the water department. And when you click on the water department, you'll see first 4 links to these 4 meetings. But I am going to pull some slides from those meetings, but obviously it's, over 2 hours worth of information that I really do believe that all residents should ensure that they take the time to look at and really understand how we've gotten to where we are today. Then we will move into reviewing the SUEZ's offer, just in highlights, looking at their experience that they bring, the cash offer that they have given, the infrastructure improvements that are a part of the RFP, and the 10-year defined rate structure that they provided in their bid to purchase the system. Then we'll talk about a timeline overview. And in summary, I'll of course remind you to contact me. So in the first meeting, we did an overview on the Allendale system, and I pulled one slide because it's really important that people understand where our water comes from in Allendale. We get 50% of our water from our Allendale wells. So we have 5 wells in Allendale, so that's groundwater. We are able, through the NJDEP permits, to pull up a certain amount of water. We treat it, it goes through the distribution system. The other 50% of our water is purchased from SUEZ. That's surface water, and SUEZ manages that. And it comes into our system and is distributed. In the second meeting, we talked a lot about water quality. And here, there was an overview on the importance of maintaining compliance with these evolving drinking water guidance and regulations from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. They're our watchdog, and it's important that we really appreciate what they do because they keep our water safe for us to consume. We were specifically looking at these per and polyfluoroalkyl substances called PFASs. They've been in the news, and they are the newest regulated compounds, and they're regulated in very small numbers, parts per trillion, which, most things are either parts per million or parts per billion. A part per trillion is like a grain of sand in a swimming pool. But we have the ability to measure it, and we have the ability to remove it. And so now we're being held to standards, and Allendale is in compliance, but it is something that we will begin to need to look at to treat the water for in the future. We also talked about the economics of water. Allendale has a separate water utility, and about just over $2 million runs through that utility each year. We do not make money on this utility. It really has been there to serve the residents. But the cost of the compliance with these evolving drinking water regulations and the upkeep of what we have is an aging system. Some of the pipes are as old as between 1900 and 1910, and it is becoming increasingly expensive. And with all this new regulation, new treatment will be needed. In the third meeting, we built upon that and talked about what are the objectives of Allendale Water. And as a resident, I myself feel that these are very important. And the number one thing is that we have quality water, and Allendale does currently meet or exceed all of the NJDEP water standards. These ever evolving standards will make this more challenging. Water availability, absolutely important. And currently, as I said, Allendale can only produce 50% of our water, and we purchase the rest from SUEZ. But making sure that we have that number one, the quality water, or else we can't use our own wells if they're not up to standard. Number three, we should be looking as residents to have a reasonable cost structure. So right now, water is by far the most reasonable utility that we have. If you look at what your water bill is for a quarter versus your cell phone bill for a month, you can see how reasonable water has been. And the fourth thing is that I think we should expect and maybe I should have put minimal water interruptions, but when we have water main breaks or unexpected things happen within the system, that causes interruptions that cannot be planned. You might not get a notification that your water is being shut off when we have a water main break, even if it's in the center of town, as we've had a couple of times over the past year. So we want to try to minimize that. And then number five, and this is a part of why we've been having these meetings for over a year, is that we should expect transparency about the challenges and the decision process for future, changes within Allendale Water. And so and for this presentation, in the third one, we talked about these same objectives, but then we also talked about the challenges, and I kind of switched it up because the reality is that the challenges are all come about because it's important that we meet the objectives. So what I've done is made the chart, I think, a little bit more user friendly, where we look at quality water. Well, what's the challenge with that? Well, those are ensuring that we attain any NJDEP standards. And as I said, they are our watchdogs. New Jersey has some of the most strict standards in the nation. And specifically, I can say that as we look at these are maximum contaminant limits on PFASs, those are going to be challenging. There's also, I'm sure you've heard a lot about in Newark, the lead lines and elsewhere in the country. So there's what's called a lead and copper rule. And in Allendale, we have no indication that we have any challenges, but we still have to meet reports. And there's a specific report that is new that will be required. And that is that Allendale Water, or whatever utility owns the Allendale system, will have to report what the homeowner's water side is made of. Now, that's something that it's not been in Allendale's business to have to find that. And so we have about 30% of the Allendale connections identified. And the cost in today's dollars to do what would be required over these next couple of years, which would be digging to understand what's there, is about $750,000. And that's just to make sure we have a report that we can fill. There's also the Water Quality Accountability Asset Plan. And parts of that is putting into place pipe replacements, which is important. But all these things are very costly, but they are important to maintain quality water. The water availability as an objective, the challenge here really is that we can't pull enough water from our wells. So, number one, the challenge is that we have to buy it already from SUEZ. We spend just over $500,000 annually purchasing water. And it's important that obviously we keep our wells and our treatment and our distribution system maintained in order to be able to distribute the water that we buy and the water that we pull from our wells. The reasonable cost structure, the challenge just is all these expenses. And I'm sure people may have noticed that in 2021 of January, we did a 10% rate increase. We also had a 10% rate increase last year. And that really is just to cover general maintenance and the increasing costs of testing and all the operations and management and repairs. Reasonable water interruptions, the challenge is that older mains break. And I gave, the example of water breaks in town, but the cost of that is, because we're a small municipality, we don't have the economies of scale that, the estimate to replace just the portion of Myrtle that goes in between the downtown and the light, it's about 2,100 feet. It would be today about $650,000. And we do, have some aging pipes. And then the transparency, I like to think we don't have any challenges with that. That's the one, because, we do try to be transparent. At the third meeting, we also talked about, building from the infrastructure to the challenges. What are the options that we should be looking at to be responsible in the future? And it came down to really three choices. And I'm going to talk first about the third one, the something else. The something else that we could identify was really saying, how could we do shared services with other municipalities? And if you've come to council meetings and listened to my reports, I have worked very diligently to try to bring in other municipalities. I've set up, mayor's meetings. I've set up meetings with NJDEP, inviting other elected officials. I've had one-on-one meetings with different water municipalities, but nothing has really bubbled up. I mean, Ridgewood Water has been tremendous in educating me and really helping me, go to certain meetings and learn a lot about water treatment and options that are out there. But there has been nothing in the shared services that has to yet come up. And it's hard. It's hard to do shared services. It would still mean that we would still be responsible for owning and maintaining our system. Perhaps we could, share some of the costs with somebody else, but it's a very challenging step for Allendale to take. So for right now, I'm going to take that off the table for this evening's discussion. Retaining the ownership of our water system, certainly that is something that we can do. Again, keeping in mind that we would have to invest in a new treatment facility, which at a minimum will be between 2.8 and $3 million. We would need to continue an operations and management agreement that would increase in cost each year, and we'd have to invest in replacing the aging infrastructure. So that's certainly an option, but I won't talk any more about that this evening. I'll get to kind of the meat of what I wanted to make sure I was sharing with all of the Allendale residents. And that's about the opportunity to say, as a future, we may sell our water system and water would operate like Rockland Electric and PSE&G. And so April 7th, because I'd shared that we, we're going down these different pathways. And on April 7th, we did release requests for bids, or an RFB. And we, on May 28th, opened the bids that we received, and SUEZ was determined to be the highest responsible bidder. So SUEZ currently operates and maintains our system, but we still own it. And tonight I'm going to now review 4 important components of the SUEZ offer. And they will be, a higher look at it. And that's because it's actually, an entire binder is the bid. And as we, are combing through working with SUEZ, it's important that we begin to take this bid and transition transition it into an actual purchase agreement. This does not sell our system, this process. This is just an important thing to do so that when it comes to the referendum, that it is clearly defined, what that business agreement would look like. So I'm going to talk about the experience of SUEZ as a water utility, the $18 million cash offer that SUEZ has offered for our system. That's no small number. I'll talk about the infrastructure investment, a little bit about the short term and a little bit about the long term. And I'll talk about the 10-year defined rate structure. And even before I move on, we will have future meetings. So you may have questions on what I'm presenting. Tonight, I'm not going to take questions on the bid because I don't have legal counsel with me, and I feel like it's important to just get the basic information out there. Please, email me with questions and we can talk through it. And we want to make sure, and SUEZ wants to make sure that we discuss anything and everything. So talking about SUEZ as as a potential owner, SUEZ is highly experienced in drinking water management. And that is incredibly important because water is such a precious resource and the treatment and the distribution is complicated. There are thousands of tests that need to be done each year. We have 49 miles of pipe that, distributes our water throughout town. Obviously, I said we have those 5 wells. So the history of SUEZ, really, SUEZ began as the Hackensack Water Company 152 years ago. The SUEZ Water New Jersey headquarters is in Haworth. I've driven there myself on Waze. It's 10 miles away, which I think is a positive that they are in our northern Bergen County area. SUEZ Water New Jersey provides drinking water to over 1 million New Jersey homes. They certainly provide water nationally in other places, but to me, what's important was what's going on in New Jersey. So over 1 million homes. They have employees focused on future regulations and treatments. And certainly I would be remiss if I did not share that regulation will increase. The EPA and the NJDEP are constantly and to our benefit exploring additional limits. What compounds, do we need to be looking at? Can they be measured? Can they be treated? What is the appropriate levels to put in to hold any water utility to ensure that all of us that turn on our tap, that we are safe. SUEZ has economies of scale and financial resources to invest in the Allendale infrastructure. SUEZ North America is a big company. They have 4.1 billion in assets. They have many crews to manage water breaks and conduct the required maintenance. You have probably seen since 2013, many SUEZ trucks coming through Allendale when we have had challenges. And that was my last point to make, is that they have managed and operated our system since 2013. So they also know our system, which is good. So I don't want to take away from us having owned our system and all the history that we have. We have really managed well. And I think everybody in Allendale should be pleased with the water service you have had. But the resources and knowledge are limited and costs are quickly escalating. So I think we do need to consider, what are we going to do in the future? The $18 million cash offer, that is a one-time infusion of cash into the borough of Allendale. This will enable us to pay all of our current debt and notes, that being notes and bonds as they come due. And that's not just water debt, that would also cover municipal debt that we currently have. And some of that is driven by statute. And I'm not going to speak to that right during this meeting. Again, I want to give a general overview. The remaining funds of that $18 million would be set aside for additional needs. And again, we need to have a financial advisor that can give some better details to those of you that are interested in getting down to the details. And certainly we will need to earmark funds for some future expenses. Currently, within the water utility, we do pay health benefits for, old employees of Allendale Water. So that will continue for years ahead. And also we may need to earmark funds for some fire protection that we would need in the future. So the next thing the third area I'd like to cover is SUEZ commitment to invest in Allendale water infrastructure. And the first thing, and it was a part of the requirements of the RFB, was to share with us what was their plan to keep Allendale at, in compliance with the NJDEP as far as PFAS. And I want to remind you that, it's a minimum due to the feasibility study that we had looked at of $2.8 to $3 million. And then certainly there will be additional costs for us to continue to have the maintenance and management of a new treatment facility, but it's something that we would need. And then additional commitments, SUEZ gave about 2 pages of a list of upgrades that they would be putting into Allendale, and they would benefit both Allendale residents and SUEZ because they would allow the system to run more efficiently. And that's good for whoever's owns the system, but it's also good for us as residents. And some of these items, as I read through, I'm like, yep, because some of them are ones that we had looked at. Like one of them is a computer system we have, which is a SCADA system. And they had asked us to do upgrades because it would allow simpler monitoring, more efficient monitoring from their Harworth facility, but certainly it works appropriately now. But we didn't have the money to be able to put the $500,000 or $600,000 into that. And there's been other choices that we've had to make as far as what will we do for capital expenditures each year. And then they would obviously, if they were to be the owner of our system, they would have to do the lead and copper rule reports. And like I said, that's about $750,000 in today's dollars. And it's not due tomorrow. This is over the next couple of years. And a pipe replacement plan would have to be put into place. The minimum infrastructure investment that we required in the bid, so that was when we put out the RFB, we had minimum requirements, was $300,000 a year. We currently earmark about $250,000, and SUEZ is well above that threshold. I mean, the estimates were, up in the numbers around 16 million over the first 5 years. And the last area I wanted to cover was to talk about the rate plan for the next 10 years. We had asked for a defined rate plan. So that would mean that we would be in a contract almost with the rates for the next 10 years. And then any rate increases after that would be under the oversight of the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. So they're, kind of your watchdog for all ratepayers under a public utility. So that is what would happen after that time frame. So now I'd like to review I'm going to give a general look at the rate increases that they had presented to us. We will review the actual dollars at another meeting so that you can look at the groups at commercial, residential, senior, COA housing, those types of things. But this is a general overview. In year 1, we would have a 0% rate increase. Year 2 is a 2% rate increase just to the fixed rate. So that's the minimum purchase. And what that means based upon 2020 usage would be it's an overall rate increase of about 0.5%, but we would all see a 2% increase on that first minimum 9,000 gallons. And just as a comparison, we would, if we were to retain the system in order to bond the $2.8 to $3 million, we would have a 30% rate increase to that fixed rate in January of 2022 in order to, have the funds to be able to appropriately bond the monies for the New Street PFAS treatment plant, which we can look back at my previous presentations to get more information. Year 3 that we would also have a 0% rate increase, year 4, 0%, year 5, we would see a 5% rate increase across the board. And then years 6 through 10 would also have a 5% rate increase every 30 months. And then years 11 plus would go under the Board of Public Utilities, as I had shared previously. And this is all assuming a July 2022 closing. And certainly, that involves a number of things. It involves that, number one, we would pass a referendum saying that, yes, indeed, this was an offer that the residents of Allendale's wanted to pass. And number two, the entire agreement also has to be approved by the BPU. So with that, I'm going to give a little timeline. And on April 7th, we released the RFP. April 22nd, we had pre-bids meetings. Entities that were interested in participating in the bid could ask questions. And then May 2nd, we started tours of the facilities. May 28th, the RFP was due. That was the date that we opened them. And then I had shared, this is a slide from a previous presentation, that the highest responsible bidder would be identified because we needed to make sure that all the components were met. And originally this had said, if a favorable offer received. Now it says favorable offer received, because we do believe this is a favorable offer and want to ensure that we bring it to the Allendale residents. So in June and July, we'll have public meetings and public hearings. And this is one that we're having today, but we will certainly have more. Ourselves, we are working to clarify, as I spoke early, the offer or the bid into a purchase agreement. This purchase agreement needs to be brought to the mayor and council, so that will be done at council meetings. And we're targeting to do that on July 9th and then again on July 22nd. The thing that's important for people to understand is that this would not be signed. And it won't go into effect. It will have a clause that says, it's not activated. That's not the right legal word, until a referendum will be passed, but it won't be signed either until we have numerous public meetings, because we want to hear what residents have to say. And SUEZ wants to hear what residents have to say, so that we make this purchase agreement as beneficial for all parties as possible. And then in August, September, and October, we'll have more public meetings and hearings trying to make sure we get the word out. Here, the next public meeting will either be July 14th or July 21st. I'm not sure which, and it depends on kind of where we are with information. And so we'll make sure that we get that out on Constant Contact. Then the following meeting will be August 18th. And these will all, again, any meetings where we're virtual, we will record them. But I'd also ideally like to be able to go around and be in person at meetings where it's appropriate, myself, the rest of the water committee, and SUEZ too, to be able to answer questions in person. So I'm, hopefully going to be able to be invited to the PTO meetings, to, the Women's Club, AFI, the XYZ Club. And anyway, so other groups, and certainly reach out, because I know we'd like to make sure that we get the word out to everybody. And as I said, to make sure people are educated when they go to the voting booth in November. Because in November, Allendale residents will be asked to vote yes or no to the sale. So with that, we are at 7:29, and I have my final comments. And that really is that the goal of the Water Committee's efforts through and through is to have the best long-term outcome for Allendale. There is nothing else other than that. And the SUEZ offer is a favorable one for Allendale to consider. And that is the reason why we really felt that it was important to bring this forward. And there will be further discussion at future public meetings. And with that, I will, again, put up my email, the next meeting being either the 14th or the 21st. And I hope that this has been helpful.